For more Magic the Gathering resources, check out my friends at paperchampion.net and Kitchen Table MTG.
Hey everybody, this is Tao at The Forge, and this week I'm coming back to you with an old deck that I've previously presented, but since revamped a little bit. I was down actually at my local game store building this in paper recently, and the people at the game store asked, hey, what are you building? What does it look like? And so on and so forth. So I showed them the deck, and they were kind, but I think they were a little bit skeptical. I think they like the idea of it, but I think most people when they look at this deck are kind of skeptical about how competitive it is. So I thought, you know what, let's try it out against some of the tougher decks on Magic Online and see how we do. So that's what I did, and what I found is that, well, there are some things we could have done to make this a little bit better. But for those of you guys that haven't seen the original video, let's go through the deck. This deck centers around a card called Puca's Mischief. Right, so Puca's Mischief is a 4-mana enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exchange control of target non-land permanent you control and target non-land permanent an opponent controls with an equal or lesser converted mana cost. So what this means is that we can switch one of our permanents with our opponent's permanents as long as it's not a land, and as long as their permanent has an equal or lesser converted mana cost. So that allows us to come up with a whole bunch of different shenanigans. Right, so what we're going to do, though, is, we don't want to trade them our good stuff for their good stuff because, we don't want to give them any good stuff. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to play a whole crap ton of removal and disruption and just give that to them. So we're going to be playing a couple Journey to Nowhere. Right, so pair of Journey to Nowhere. Okay, for 2 mana, you can exile target artifact or target creature. 4 Oblivion Rings. Okay, so for 3 mana, you can exile another target non-land permanent, okay, and until the Oblivion Ring leaves the battlefield. 4 Detention Spheres, these are probably the best ones in the deck. Okay, so when Detention Sphere enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-land permanent, and all the other ones with the same name as well, and basically it's like a more powerful Oblivion Ring. That's actually probably one of the best cards that we have. Okay, Nevermore, which just says, as Nevermore enters the battlefield, choose a non-land card name. Spells with the chosen name can't be cast. Alright, so that's just going to create more disruption. Now, once we get these down, what we're going to do is we'll use them to capture our opponent's stuff. And the cool thing is in Modern, most of that stuff is going to cost anywhere between 1 and 4 mana. Right, so as long as it's 1 to 3 mana, we can actually trade almost all of this stuff for their stuff. So for instance, we can go and cast, let's say they play something down, like an Elvish Mystic or something like that. We cast Journey to Nowhere on it, and then they put another one down. Later on, if we get Puca's Mischief, we can trade that Journey to Nowhere for their other Elvish Mystic. And so they're stuck with the Journey to Nowhere with their own Elvish Mystic underneath it, and we have their creature back instead. Right, so things get a little more interesting when we get up to the 4 mana slot. Now, I don't really have anything more than 4 mana, okay, but we have Saltskitter. Now, Saltskitter is actually, it seems like one of the worst creatures in Magic, but it's actually pretty good in this deck. So it's a 3/4 creature. It says, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, exile Saltskitter. Return Saltskitter to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So what that means is it doesn't say under its controller's control. It says under its owner's control. So once we get this down, we can trade Saltskitter for one of our opponent's 4 mana or less things. And then once we play a creature or they play a creature, it exiles, but it comes back to us. Right, so we get their creature, and then we take back the Saltskitter as well, which is pretty awesome. All right, we're also playing Bronze Bombshell, which can be a pretty good beater, just a 4/1. But mainly what we want to do is change this or trade this, and then it deals 7 damage to your opponent when your opponent controls it. So these are actually pretty good, but we can actually just win the game straight out with just the Bronze Bombshells if we just trade them all away. All right, so it seems like a little bit of a glass cannon, and it kind of is, but it is actually fairly effective. I'll show you what else we have in the package here. So we've got Wall of Omens. We really need to get our Puca's Mischief down, and so what we're doing is we're just stalling and stalling until we can get that card. Right, so we're going to use Wall of Omens to help block. It's just a 0/4 blocker, but it helps to help us draw a card, which is super good. Fog Banks are just notoriously bad to get rid of. They're super hard to get rid of. especially if the person has no like spell removal. They're just like waiting, mainly using creatures to beat on you. All right. Serum Visions is just card draw to help us look. So drawing a card is important, but scrying is actually probably even more important. I would probably put it in there even if I could just scry 2. But still, I'll take it, of course. And then one Monastery Siege, which is just a nice-to-have card. Right, so at the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card, then discard a card. We mainly almost always use that because towards the mid game or late game, we really want to draw more action, and an extra fog bank when we have things locked down is not really going to help us that much. Or sometimes we do need the fog bank, or we just want to get rid of an extra land that we have, or whatever. Right, we rarely ever use the dragon side, so spells your opponents cast that target you or a permanent you control cost 2 more to cast, unless we're playing against Burn. Burn is probably one of our worst matchups, so that's what we're going to use to try and hold up Burn. It's only a one of in the deck because I can't really find any other place for it, or any other place for anything else. Okay, so that's the main deck. Supreme Verdict. We got 2 Supreme Verdict here, so just destroy all creatures. We don't run too many creatures, but sometimes our opponent can overwhelm us, and then we can get down to Supreme Verdict, just wipe their creatures, and then start again, except this time we have more mana and more removal, and so on and so forth. Okay, one of the stars of the deck is our 3 of Venser the Sojourner. So Venser's +2 is exile target permanent you own, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. Okay, and then his -1, creatures can't be blocked this turn. We rarely use that. And then the -8 we use actually quite a bit. If we even get that far. So what we do is we exile a target permanent you own. That's going to be either a Journey to Nowhere or Oblivion Ring or Detention Sphere or Nevermore or something like that. So let's say, for instance, early game we cast, let's go with my previous example, we cast Nevermore, and then we capture one of their Elvish Mystics. All right, so, okay, well, big whoop. Well, that's good early on because that means they can't ramp their mana. Okay, great. But let's say late game, that Elvish Mystic doesn't really matter that much. Once we drop Venser, right, so let's say they drop something bigger, like a Obstinate Baloth or something like that, then what we can do is we can exile our own Journey to Nowhere, right, give them back their Elvish Mystic, and then basically, when it comes back, we can target their Obstinate Baloth, then we'll capture that back, and then the beginning of our next turn, we just trade it back, we're using Puca's Mischief back for their Elvish Mystic that we just gave back to them. So Venser actually really allows us to kind of abuse our capture enchantments. Right. The other thing that we can do is if we capture something with Detention Sphere, once we get Venser down, our opponent can't really play any more of those things, because if we have, let's say we've got their Elvish Mystic, again, under Detention Sphere. If they play another one, we can just use Venser to bounce it, and then we'll return the Mystic to them. It comes in with Summoning Sickness, so they doesn't really do anything. At the end of the turn, we just capture it back, but this time we would capture both of them. And then if we don't really have any other targets, we can always do a land, or we can just do it on Wall of Omens, and Wall of Omens will just allow us to draw another card. So Venser is just pretty sweet this way, and allowing us to just basically abuse and recycle the ETB triggers of our capture enchantments, or else our Wall of Omens to draw cards. So once we get him up to our +8, and this actually happens, actually goes to 9 after 3 turns, gets to 9, which is really nice because then you don't really usually have to sack him. All right, but this actually happens quite a bit, mainly because we're stalling the board so badly that our opponent often can't do anything, and we usually have so many blockers that our opponent can't get to Venser. So once that happens, you can whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent. So it means every time we cast a spell, we're just blowing up their stuff, right? Which is just huge. So anyways, then our opponents usually scoop at that point when they realize we've got them locked down like that. All right, going to the lands. The lands haven't really changed much since the original incarnation. The 4 of Seachrome Coast, right? Just fast lands there. We've got 3 plains, 3 islands. Okay, 4 of Hallowed Fountains, 4 Glacial Fortress. But one thing I did change is I had some Flooded Strands in here, and I took out 1 plain, 1 island, and just put in 4 Ghost Quarters. Now, the reason why I did this is because I found there's some decks, particularly Tron, that are really, really hard to deal with. And unless we can disrupt their land in some way, it's just really difficult for us to have any chance against them. So I kind of had to make a concession there. Ghost Quarter's not perfect, but it's not also that bad. You know, we have some things that cost a lot, like Supreme Verdict and Detention Sphere and Nevermore, that require like double of certain manas. But still, I think the 4 of Ghost Quarter is worth it. All right, so going to the sideboard, we've got a 3 of Path to Exile. Now, the reason why is we generally don't want to just get rid of stuff, right? Like, we want our enchantments to sit on the battlefield so we can trade them later. But sometimes the decks come out and they're just so fast. You know, like Goblins or Red Deck Wins is like that. You know, it's just really hard to deal with them. So sometimes you just have to get something like a Path to Exile, you know, out and just to stop your opponent from doing something, from attacking you flat out. All right. Stony Silence is, well, this would be actually horrible against Affinity, but it's actually not there for Affinity. It's actually against Tron again. We actually are fairly okay against Affinity. It's just that against Tron, like they're using like all their eggs and stuff to draw cards, and then they're using their expedition maps and Oblivion stones and stuff like that to wreck your stuff. So Stony Silence actually helps us to get rid of the Tron stuff and prevent and slow Tron down, so we can start getting into a mode where we can trade with them. The reason why Tron's so hard to deal with is because they generally play creatures that are just so huge that you can't really trade with them for anything. So what we're trying to do is lock them down until we can get Venser in, and once we get Venser in, then we're mainly just trying to like blow up their Tron lands and then slowly just destroy their whole board. Right? That's our main win condition, our win strategy against a deck like Tron. Right, we are heavily unfavored against that deck, and also Red Deck Wins. Those are two decks that we are just really not good against. All right, we also, so against Red Deck Wins or Burn, we've got Leyline of Sanctity. All right, so that's just a standard there. Against Tron and some other decks, we have Pithing Needle. All right, so to stop Planeswalkers from activating. Relic of Progenitus, okay, against some graveyard shenanigans decks. Those ones aren't too bad, but sometimes, like, you know, you can get like a weird lock on you where they're recurring stuff, you know, from the graveyard, and it's just really annoying. So Relic of Progenitus is kind of nice. And then I've got a 4 of Ensnaring Bridge. Now, it might seem weird that we're playing Ensnaring Bridge, but the reason why is because what we can do is we can switch to a complete lockdown strategy. So we can get rid of our 4 mana cost spells like Bronze Bombshell and Saltskitter, and just like kind of lower the converted mana cost of our deck. Go down to Ensnaring Bridge, right? So not go down, but just put in 4 Ensnaring Bridges and then like some Pithing Needles or Path to Exiles or something like that. And then, especially if our creature is not playing any artifact removal and they're creature heavy, they won't be able to attack us. And then what we can do is just lock them down slowly using the Ensnaring Bridge, eventually get Venser online, blow up all their stuff. And then what we can do is actually just use one of our Detention Spheres to capture our own Ensnaring Bridge, or we can cast a spell and just use Venser to blow up, like our Venser emblem, to blow up our own Ensnaring Bridge when we're ready and attack our opponent. So that's kind of a long shot, but sometimes that's the only thing that we might be able to do, especially in a really difficult match. So that's why it's in there, but you know, hopefully we never have to get into a situation where you have to go that route. Anyways, that's the deck that I put together. If you guys have any suggestions, then please let me know. I can tell you it's pretty fun, and it is surprisingly competitive, even after sideboarding. Like, a lot of people think, like, well, your opponent is just going to sideboard against you, and, you know, then you'll be wrecked. But I found even when we're playing, like, you know, after sideboarding, we're still actually fairly good. It doesn't mean we win a lot, but I'd say we actually win more often than we lose. Which is surprising, you know. So I think it's just because a lot of people aren't really prepared for this sort of strategy. Anyways, that's the deck. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you do like it, please let me know with a like in the by hitting the like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.